Welcome to this edition of You Can Get There From Here. I'm Dr. Joe Moore, Chair of the Department of Communication and Digital Media Production here at the University of Central Missouri, and it's my pleasure every week to get to sit down and visit with some of our alumni. I talk to those who graduated in digital media production, others who got their degree in communication studies, some who got their master's degree. On this show, I've talked to alumni who graduated a couple years ago, some who graduated in the past decade, a few who graduated back with me when I was going to school here in the 80s and 90s. But today we get something special. We get to talk with somebody who was here even before I was. Say hello to Jack Connors. Jack, I'm so excited to have you on the show today. Really, this is going to be an easy one for me because when I asked you to be on the show, you emailed me, you shared some of your story, you shared some of what you do when you go speaking about leadership and things like that. And really, I'm just going to give you the floor and let you open up and share your experience with our listeners. So thank you for being here today. We're really excited to hear from you.
Joe, it is absolutely my pleasure. There's the years that I spent in Warrensburg, and the university at that time was not the University of Central Missouri. It was called Central Missouri State University. So CMSU kind of leaks into my conversation occasionally. But I learned more in 2 years there than I learned in high school and college, undergraduate college, combined. And the reason is that for the first time in my life, I had a chance to surround myself with people who are interested in the same things that I was interested in. And that is how to use media, how to play on a larger stage than just interpersonally. And it seemed like every class that I wound up signing up for and taking opened up another set of doors for me. And those doors took me through a 47-year career. Not all of it, but almost all of it was in television. I spent 2 years in the Army at Fort Bragg and a little bit in radio, but most of what I did professionally was in television. I had a chance to work as a reporter, as a 6 and 10 o'clock anchor. I was a sports director. I even did weather for a short period of time, not a meteorologist. And then I wound up on the business side of it. I was a local sales manager, a general sales manager. And then for the last 31 years that I worked in television, I was a general manager. I had a chance to work in California, Minnesota, twice, Missouri, Illinois, twice, and in North Carolina and South Carolina. And a lot of the things that I was first exposed to in Warrensburg and at the university wound up being things that I depended on as my career went along. I learned a lot there, and I used a lot of what I learned.
Well, before we get really in depth into what you did after college, tell us how you got here. Where are you from originally? You didn't get your undergraduate degree here at UCM or CMSU, as you and I remember it. But take us on that backstory, on that journey that brought you here to Warrensburg first.
I got my undergraduate degree. I was an English major, and I got my undergraduate degree at the University of Missouri in St. Louis at UMSL. And people would say, well, what did you want to do? Did you want to teach English? And I said, no, I wanted to write. Ultimately, when you strip everything away from me and you say, what's your basic core skill, if you have any? And the answer would be, I'm a writer. And that's what I used when I worked as a reporter, when I was doing commentaries, because I did that for probably 16, 17 years, on-air commentaries, and I wrote all of those myself. So that's why I wound up at UMSL. It was a brand new university then. It's not nearly as old as Central Missouri, the University of Central Missouri. They're at LinkedIn. And I wound up getting drafted. I went to Fort Bragg after basic training, and I was assigned to a psychological operations battalion I had no idea what that was. Um, and what I wound up doing, I was a news director of one of the two radio stations that the Department of Defense for the United States had the licenses for. One was at the Air Force Academy in Colorado, and the other one was at Fort Bragg. So I was the news director for that. Then someone at Fort Bragg forgot to sign some paperwork, and we lost the authority to operate.
Oh,
So then I
no.
wound up moving into other things, kind of a bunch of OTOs, one time only. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot there, but I learned it kind of on the job as opposed to having any kind of a plan or preparation for it. Um, the head and the psychological operations battalion was part of the 5th Special Forces Group, the Green Berets. So I was surrounded by Green Berets all the time, Special Forces guys. And the head of the Green Berets, the general in charge, was a major general. And he decided that he wanted to try to use the US military in the same way the Russians were using their military to be a home or a landing spot for Olympic athletes. And I was the basketball coach for the Green Berets. I had a guy who played pro basketball who was drafted at the same time I was. So obviously, we won every game. The general liked that. So after the season was over, he called me in and he said, I want you to come up with something and figure out how we can use the military for that. And I said, General, could you give me an example? And he said, yeah, in Russia, if you're a shot putter and you're drafted, you become the unit's shot putter. I said, okay, understand. So the basketball player, the NBA, the NBA player, his name was Van Williford, and I went around the country and made speeches to members of Congress, visiting dignitaries, visiting generals from, Thailand or Vietnam, someplace. And we talked about Project 76, which is what we wound up calling it. Again, no planning for that at all. I had a chance to get discharged from the Army maybe a couple of months early, month or two early. And so I started applying to graduate schools because I still wanted to do something and kind of sharpen the knife a little bit. And I was accepted at two other schools. One of them was in Kentucky and one of them was in Florida. I'm from Missouri. I'm from St. Louis, born and raised, Cardinal fan. And then I applied to the University of Central Missouri, which is what it was at that time. I had never been on the campus, and I was accepted. And I asked my wife because we were at Fort Bragg, and I said, "What do you think about Warrensburg, Missouri?" She said, "Where is it?" I said, "Well, it's pretty close to Interstate 70. It's a little closer to Kansas City than St. Louis." And she said, "If you think that's the place we should go, then that's where we went." My wife got a job at the university before I did. She was the traffic manager for the radio station and the I guess assistant to the fellow who was the general manager of the radio station at that point. I was doing a graduate assistantship there, and I was taking classes, and I had a chance to work with a fella that I know you worked with, Joe, yourself, Bill Turnage. Uh, and I wound up doing a little play-by-play, but doing a lot of color for the Mules basketball and football games. And I learned an incredible amount from Bill Turnage because he was the ultimate professional. And I know that you had the same kind of experience and that
Yep.
you had the same regard for Bill that I do.
Yes, very much so. Yeah.
So
So what
I
was it
wound up with
about?
that background. Um, really enjoyed the traveling. We went down to play the University of Florida in basketball. Obviously, that was a bit of a rout, but it was a great experience for me. And then after graduate school, We had been married for about 4.5 years. I needed to make a little money, and we wanted to start a family. And I got a job offer from San Luis Obispo, just south of San Luis Obispo, California, as a news and sports director for the station, working 6 days a week. So I did that and spent about 2 years there. Wanted to get back closer to Missouri, and I wound up taking a job in Austin, Minnesota, the home of the George A. Hormel plant. And I walked into the station there, and I had done a lot of football and basketball. And I walked in on Monday, and the secretary said, "Oh, we're so glad to see you because we haven't had anyone doing news and sports. You know how to do hockey, right?" And I went, sure. She said, "That's good because tomorrow's our first broadcast." So I wound up sitting down with a fellow who was a hockey player who was going to do color with me. And I said, kind of review, help me out a little bit here. And he did a great job of helping me learn on the job about hockey. And I wound up doing 2 years of Austin Mavericks hockey. That was the junior A hockey team. And the fellow's name was Lou Vero. And in 1976, remember when the United States beat Russia in the Olympics?
Yeah.
That's the great call by the play-by-play guy. Do you believe in miracles?
Yep.
Yes. Well, the assistant coach to that hockey team, to the U.S. hockey team, was Lou Vero. So I knew the assistant coach of the guy who eventually won the gold medal for the United States there. And as Lou was leaving, he had a very interesting background. He was a dessert chef on cruise ships going back and forth between England and New York. He's from New York.
Really?
Yeah. And he was teaching a class at a local community college in Austin, Minnesota, about how to fix these incredibly fancy and ornate desserts. My wife is a wonderful cook, and she took his class. So every Tuesday, she would come back with a plate full of these wonderful desserts. So I'm doing play-by-play for his hockey. My wife is in his class. And then when he gets the job offer from the U.S. Olympic Committee, he's got an old, rusted, copper-colored Buick Riviera. And he said, "I don't need to take this thing with me. Does anybody want it?" My wife raised her hand. She said, "Yeah, we'll take it." He only had one vehicle at that point. So we wound up driving Lou Vero's car for about 5 years while he was off doing other things and extending his career. And that was just one of the, again, you got to be the right guy in the right place at the right time. It isn't because you're necessarily that smart. You just wound up being in the right spot. I was.
I'm going to have to go back and watch the movie The Miracle now and see if Lou
Yes.
Vero's in there because he plays a pretty prominent role in the film. So, and I do remember watching the Olympics and watching that match and hearing the call and you knew the guy. That's pretty cool. Let's
Yep.
let's let's go back just a hair. You said that you got offers to go to a couple of other graduate programs. What made you decide on Central Missouri State?
Well, the first thing that I liked was the geography. I'm born and raised in St. Louis, so it was fairly close, certainly closer than Murray, Kentucky, and whatever the university was in Florida. I don't even remember its name now. It was an affordable school, and I had the GI Bill. Thank God I had the GI Bill because without that, there's no way I could afford it. And when I got on campus, and again, I'm leaving Central California, which is 1,400 miles away from where I grew up, and everyone on campus, it was like I was their long lost brother. Everyone went out of their way Have you found a place to live? Do you know where the churches are? Uh, there's a really nice restaurant close to where your apartment is, and people just went. They extended themselves to make Kathy and I very comfortable, and we found a nice apartment, a two-bedroom, a basement apartment. I don't remember the name of the street in Warrensburg, but if you went up the hill from our apartment, there was a tennis court on campus. That's what I remember. And um, the classes that I took, I enjoyed every one of them. My advisor was a fellow who I think has passed away now, Dr. David Eshelman. I think
Yep.
he had your job, Joe. I think he
He
was
did.
I know he
He did for a
was
time.
the chairman of the department. And you had him too, right?
I had him for a couple of classes. Yeah, I had him as for
Yeah.
a law class, and then I had him for a couple in graduate school.
Yeah, he was a great guy. And everyone that I met, including the athletic trainer for the football team, a great guy. And I got a job offer from someone in Utah, and he had gone to school in Utah. And I said, "Would you suggest that I do this?" And he said, "The weather's a little tough. So if you like winter, it's great place to go. But otherwise," he said, "you can probably find, other employment." Turns out that I could, but that's the kind of tip that, and this guy was like my brother. People in Warrensburg, I mean, it's a good sized metropolitan area. You can get most of what you want, and you're an hour away or so from the Royals and the Chiefs in Kansas City. So I enjoyed Warrensburg. I enjoyed the experience of being in graduate school, and especially when I was surrounded by people who were interested in doing the things that I wanted to do.
Well, I'm glad that you were able to come here. I'm glad you got the great experience out of it. And I'm also glad that you spent some time in the Army. Thank you for your service, by the way. Tell us about that experience and what it meant for your career and how it helped you along the way.
The first thing that I remember was I took basic training at Fort Leonard Wood in Missouri, and uh, here I was, a white kid from the largest city in the state, and my roommate was a black kid from some rural part, I think of Kentucky, but it could have been Tennessee. And normally I wouldn't have probably crossed paths with this guy. But the first thing I learned by being in the Army is we all want the same things. We may describe it differently, but we all want the same things. We want uh, the right thing for our family. If you have kids, then you want your kids to grow up and be, as successful as they can be. Um, I knew what I wanted to do, and he knew what he wanted to do. His dad had passed away. His mom was the owner of a funeral home in their little town in whatever state that was in. And his job after he got out of the army was to assist his mother and eventually take over the funeral home. All right. Again, he wanted the same things that I did. He just called it differently. He wanted to stay in one city because that's where he was comfortable. That was home. And I wound up living. My wife, for quite a while, would say, "We've moved so many times that I'm using the same box on move number 4 or 5 or 6." So thank God she's a good packer, because most of the time when I wound up going up for work in whatever the city was and whatever my job was, whether it's in radio or television, she was left with unpacking all of the stuff that we had. But the experience of the Army is a great leveler. And if you think you know what to do, they will help you forget what you thought you knew what to do, because it will be done the Army's way. And after a while, of running into brick walls, you go, that's not helping me much. I think I can probably just, as Snoop Dogg said, you got to get along to get along. And I learned that. And I wound up, with, again, the Project 76. I wound up flying down to the Key West Naval Air Station. I was not airborne qualified, but I wound up going down there for some reason. I was assigned to go there. And I was in this transport plane with a bunch of paratroopers. So I got a chance to sit at the last web chair in this military plane and watch guys jump out of a perfectly good airplane and land in the Gulf of Mexico.
Yep, not me. I'm not doing that.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to, if they said, you're going to have to do that, I guess I would have done it.
Sure.
But
not voluntarily, I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great experience to see how people would conquer that particular fear. And if you're not afraid of jumping out of a perfectly good airplane, I don't know you must have a different brain setup than I do. But I got it. I learned how to be a scuba diver in the Army. I haven't used that skill in a long time, but there's so many things that the Army will teach you, and they'll teach you their way. And if you want to advance and move forward, I'd say the Army is a great choice.
Well, it sounds like you learned a lot about diversity. You learned a lot about yourself. You learned a lot about overcoming fears. Those are things I think we do get from our military. You get it in athletics. You've been involved in that. You get it by going to college and experiencing people from different backgrounds and different things. I like how you said that we all want the same thing. We may call it different things. We may have a different way of going about it. So that's a really, I think that's a valuable lesson that we can all learn.
Yeah, indeed. And the way we define success, there was a fellow named James Killebrew, who in my basic training platoon, the guy was a marvelous athlete. And, we would do mile runs in combat boots. And I thought that I was a pretty good runner. And I learned that on his worst day, James was a better runner than I was. So for a little while, that bothered me. I thought, well, I can just run harder. Well, maybe I could have run harder. But it's also good to know that there are people that you're going to run into for the rest of your life who are bigger than you, stronger than you, smarter than you, more talented than you. And if you're not successful because they're better than you are in a particular skill, that's okay. Nothing you can do about it, because the best you can do is all you can do, and all you can do is enough. So it's good to realize that there's people who are going to be better than you in almost anything that you do. But my dad told me there's never been a person who has the God-given ability to work harder than you do. And if you're not successful because you didn't work hard enough, you've got no complaint. It's your fault.
Yeah, I've always, when I've coached,
James was better than me. All right. I ran as hard as I could. He's better. Move on.
Yeah, when I've coached, when I teach, I always tell my students, talent's going to fade. Effort will not. If you're willing to put forth the effort, then you're going to be successful. And one of the people who really stressed that to me, we're going to bring this all back around, was Bill Turnage. Bill was the sports information director here at the University of Central Missouri when I was going to school. He's one of the reasons I came to Central Missouri State University was because I knew I wanted to do that job for a career, and I'd heard about him. He was instrumental for you. You mentioned the work that you did with him and getting to know him with the radio station. What was it that I learned about being a professional? What was it that you took away from that experience working with Bill Turnage?
First of all, I learned that preparation is the open door to being a professional. So if you're not prepared, sometimes you might skate by and you just get lucky. But most of the time, when you're not prepared, you're going to fall down. You're going to mess it up. Um, and Bill was always prepared. So I'm working with someone who's older than me, way more experienced than me, and who's willing to kind of, lead me around by the collar, if that's what it took, to learn how to do uh, baseball and football and basketball. So we, first of all, he was really good. He was smooth. He was professional. Uh, he was great at telling a story because on radio, that's what you have to do. The audience can't see it. And I learned that if I don't prepare at least as well as him or better because he's got more experience, then I won't be able to do the job. And I remember when I was in Warrensburg, the Mules baseball team went to the Division II College World Series. So I knew that a lot of people in town or people who had graduated from the university or had kids who were attending school at that time, they might be interested. So I really enjoyed the pressure of having to know how you're going to start, and then after you start and after you've been rolling for a while, then as Jack Buck said, I had a chance to interview Jack Buck too, the Hall of Fame broadcaster for the Cardinals for, I don't know, 35, 40 years. He said, see the game, talk the game. So you don't have to, it's not really a matter of knowing what the statistics are, knowing where the statistics can be found. Okay. But just tell the people, and Jack Buck also told me, he said, baseball's probably the only game where the audience knows just as much as you do. Because, most, especially in Missouri, you grow up watching the Royals or the Cardinals, you got a pretty good idea what the manager's next move is going to be. So just see the game, talk the game. And he was right. And Bill Turnage was right. And I think Bill Turnage could have stepped into the Cardinals broadcast booth without any trouble at all. He was that good.
He was that good, and he was that dedicated to his craft and paying attention to detail and doing all of those little things. And I think from your experience in the Army, from your undergraduate experience, from your experience in your classes here at UCM and mentors like David Eshelman, it shaped you and it helped you to a wonderful career, which is what we aspire for all of our students here at the University of Central Missouri. We have a new slogan that was started, redefining what's possible. What does that mean to you?
You don't necessarily know what the outcome is going to be in most things that you do, but if you put in the time and you do the work and you prepare and you have a reasonable level of skill at whatever the job is, there's a good chance that you will be successful. I was not surprised, I would say shocked, when I won the first Emmy Award. I wound up somehow getting 4 of them for on-air commentaries, and it was in the Chicago region or the St. Louis region. That's how the regional Emmys are handed out. And I realized that when you boil it down, the guy who's working in the number 3 market of the country, which is what Chicago is, or the number 20 market in the country, which is what St. Louis was, it's a little lower now. When the camera goes on, they have the same assets and abilities that you do. So just do it as well as you can. prepare as well as you can. And then if you have a reasonable amount of talent and you're a good writer, then you can influence people. I wound up, again, a shock to me, when I first wound up in Springfield, Illinois. I was there for 18 years, running 2 NBC stations. The city of Springfield had been trying to have a federal judge reverse his own decision about a discrimination claim brought by 5 African American plaintiffs. And they brought a complaint in federal court. It was a voting rights case, because in 80 years there hadn't been one African American voted onto the city council. And that's because all of the city councilmen were elected at large. There were no districts. There were no divisions of the city. And I showed up in Springfield in 1986, I guess it was, and the city had spent 1.2, I think it was, $1 million in legal fees, trying to have the federal judge reverse himself. It's not going to happen. So I did, first commentary I ever did, I called this effort on the part of the city leaders in Springfield. I said, this is a full employment bill for lawyers. It's never going to be successful. And I can't imagine why the city is continuing to pursue this course. The next morning, one of the African American plaintiffs called me at the television station, WICS TV, and he said, I can't even talk to these guys anymore, but will you take a proposal to them? And I said, sure, we'll do whatever you want. So he details the proposal. I call the mayor. Mike Houston was the mayor of Springfield at that time. And I said, Mike, could I come over and have a conversation with you tonight at your house? He said, sure. So I go in and I said, here's a proposal. What do you think of it? So I laid out what I was told to lay out. And he says, well, I don't think I can do that, but I may be able to do this. He said, would you, he said, who called you? Who contacted you? I said, that's not really important. He said, okay, well, I could maybe, the city could maybe do this. So I went back to the plaintiffs, and then back to the city, and then back to the plaintiffs. So we're now 1 week away from the federal judge saying that he's going to throw out everyone in city government, the 5 aldermen, and he's going to impose a form of government on the city, which will be partisan. So you'll run as Republican or Democrat, which means it's going to be much more expensive. And I think he said there's going to be 24 districts, as opposed to what had been the case, no districts. So I take that to the mayor, and he talks to the alderman, and they say, okay, I guess we can do this. So we go into federal court on the day that the judge is going to throw out the city government of Abraham Lincoln's hometown. And the judge says, do we have an agreement? And the mayor has to stand up and say, no, we don't. We have a little problem here at the end. And I had never in my life talked to a federal judge. I had been on the front page of the newspaper, and he said, are you Mr. Connors? And I said, yes, Your Honor. He said, did you have any involvement in this? I said, yeah, a little bit, not very much. And he said, well, if you can't figure out a way of getting this thing solved with the plaintiffs and the city, I'm going to do what I said I was going to do. So he adjourned. We went into an ante room, and the fellow's name who backed out, his name was Jim something. I don't remember his last name. And I said, Jim, he's not messing around. He's as serious as a heart attack. You're going to be out of office by the time the sun goes down. He says, no, the judge will never do it. And the mayor says, yeah, he will. So we went back in about a half hour later, and the judge says, do we have an agreement or not? And the mayor says, we do have an agreement. So I wound up brokering something that I never thought I would do, Never thought I would be in front of a federal judge for anything, I hope. And that's just another example of, you got to be the right guy in the right place at the right time. Um, I don't know why anyone contacted me. I mean, mine was just an opinion, but somehow it seemed to be one of the keys to the lock.
So you went to UMSL for your undergraduate in English, and then you chose to come. You ultimately came to UCM, CMSU for your master's degree. A lot of the stories that you shared with me, I could pick out what you got from that master's program. But in your words, what was it that you took from your master's studies here at UCM that helped you into your career and to be able to broker deals and to be able to work with people?
Um, I went back to my to the paperwork that I have from graduate school, and I just wanted to refresh myself a little bit on what the classes were. And there were two classes that I took that I really got a lot of value out of. One of them was the communications law. The other one was economic aspects of mass media. But on top of the information, the data that was poured into my head by the professors of that, I wound up surrounded by people who were interested in the same things that I was interested in, and that's an amazing. Um, it's like turning a light on. I know when I directed a lot of community theater, acted and directed. And when you would work with a group of high school students, because these were all high school kids, and you want them to do a certain thing, and you may go to rehearsal for 2 weeks, and it just, they just aren't getting it. And then at some point, it's like someone turns the light on and they go, "Oh, is that what you mean?" And you go, "Yeah, okay. Success has finally landed." Um, that's what Central Missouri State University, or the University of Central Missouri, meant to me. It was a great affiliation of interests, and I'll never. It was the time was well spent, um, and if I could do it again, would I do it exactly the same way? Yeah, yeah, I think I would.
Well, we're glad you did it the way you did it when you did it, and we're glad that you would do it again. Before I let you go, I do have to ask you a couple of pieces of advice for some of our students. One piece of advice for current students, what would you tell them to get the most out of their educational experience? And then for students who are thinking about coming to the University of Central Missouri to work on their master's program, what would you tell them?
I would say if you're going to go to to college, it doesn't make any difference where you're going to go to college, because I'm talking about you and not the campus or the university. Understand that the experiences that you're going to have will imprint on you for the rest of your life. And the things that you learn, whether you learn them successfully or whether you fail at them, will make a memory that you just won't ever be able to walk away from. You wouldn't want to walk away from it. I know I've learned a lot more from things that I messed up and wasn't successful at than things that just came easily to me. So when you start undergraduate school, when you come out of high school, understand that this 4-year experience, you'll never be able to replay it or re-engineer it again. The experiences you have, the people that you meet, it's value. You're creating value for yourself. Now, when you talk about graduate school, the difference there is, instead of having an economics class and a physics class and a English class and a Spanish class, and that's all fine. I mean, I took all those too.
Yep.
When you go into graduate school, you're going to the next step, the next floor, if you would. And what you can do with that is specialize your interests, find people who are interested in doing what you're doing, finding professors who, if you have a question and you're not exactly sure which way to go, they've been talking to people like you for years. So take advantage of the exposure that they have had to other people, because some of the questions that the other students might have asked the professors would be the same question that you would ask. So just, it's like getting a wet washcloth, just wring it out as much as you can. Get as much from it as possible. In any relationship, whether it's stated or unstated, the background thought is almost always, what's in this for me? That's even in interpersonal relationships. You may find Isabella, and Isabella is the love of your life, but what's in it for you? And you should look at graduate school the same way. The effort that you put into it will equal the value that you take out of it. And there's no one who's going to put the effort in but you.
I like that. What you take out of it is the value that you put into it. So that's some great advice. Jack, thank you so much for being on with us today, for sharing your story, for sharing your experiences. I think there's a lot to unpack and take away for potential students and for our current students to help them be successful and follow in your footsteps. So Jack, thank you so much for being here.
Well, you can get there from here if here is Warrensburg.
And thanks all of you for tuning in today. Remember, you can catch every episode on our YouTube channel through the UCM Media Network. That's youtube.com/UCMMN. You can also listen on Spotify. Special thanks to Jake Mager for creating our theme music for us. Again, this is Dr. Joe Moore reminding you, you can get there from here. Have a great day.